Okay, so you're tired of sitting in a classroom? Well, I brought you to the ocean. You probably hear it in the background. This is a great space to talk about what we're going to talk about in this session, and that is time and energy and what your boundaries have to do with that. And the reason I like being here is because I love the ocean. It does stuff to me. Now, if you think about that, when you think about life, you want to end up in places that you like and with people that you like and doing things that you like, right? Well, the only way to do that is to manage your time and energy. And we're going to be talking about how boundaries are the essential way in which that occurs. Because without boundaries, here's what happens. I want you to picture yourself driving down a freeway. Okay, now you're driving down a freeway because you've decided you've got a goal. You want to have a great relationship, you want to have a certain career, you want to meet certain financial goals or health goals or whatever, and you set your path. All right, now you're driving down the freeway, and that's where you're going with your time and your energy. And then all of a sudden, you notice that your steering wheel starts to turn, and you're going, I'm not, where are we going? And it makes a right, and then it makes a left, and it goes on a different highway, and you're going, what are we doing? Well, guess what? That's what happens to us if the car in the other lane has control of our car, and that's boundaries. And a lot of people have dreams and goals. That's where they want to end up. They're not there on the steering wheel because whoever wants to can manipulate them or guide them or push them in another lane. And we're just going to end up where life takes us if we don't have self control. And what we're going to see here is that organizing your time and energy around the way that you have control to get to where you want to go in a lot of areas of life are essential. So let's talk about why time and energy. Why have I selected those to focus on in boundaries? Because here's the deal, all of us are born basically with two things: we have time and we have energy. Now, the time is we have a collection of moments that add up to days and add up to weeks and add up to months and years, and that adds up to a life. But all it is time. And we have that space of time, however long it is, to do one thing, and that's to invest the energy of our hearts, minds, souls, and strength. See, that's what we've got. We've got our talents, we have our desires, we have the ways that we can spend those to develop relationships and find resources, all of that, but it all depends on where that time and energy goes as to whether or not we're going to get there. I sit around a lot of times and hear people plan things, and I say, what do you want to do? And they say, well, I'd love to write a book. I've always wanted to write a book. Got this dream to write a book, but I just don't have any time. And so I've said before, well, actually, you've got the same amount of time everybody else does. Yeah, and you start to begin to audit how they spend their time, and back to that steering wheel, a lot of the way they're spending their time, they're not in control of. Some people, you could even ask them, what are you going to do next week? And you know what the true answer would be? They would have to say, I won't know till the week's over to see who manipulated all of my time away from me. That's the real answer. Because of the boundary issues, they're not in control of the only two things they have, and that's time and energy. Now, some people might say, well, you need a lot more than the time and energy that you'll, for example, you hear this all the time. Well, I could do that, but it takes money to make money, and I don't have any money. Really? Well, that's not what the stats show. You know what the stats show? The people that amass the greatest wealth, they pretty much 90% start out from nowhere. And what they do is they organize their time and energy to build alliances and find investors, or whatever it is to get there. Is just a different way that they invested their talents and their time and their energy. sometimes you don't have the money. Well, you can use your time and energy to go find a partner or to find a sponsor or to find an investor, all those kinds of things. Some people want relationships. And if you look at how they're spending their time and energy, you do an audit of it, they go to work, they are in the same cubicle or the same desk 5 days a week, 10 hours a day. They see the same 8 people over and over and over. They go home, they watch TV. Saturday, they run some errands. Sunday, they might go to church or go do something fun. And the traffic pattern, the way that their time and energy is being invested, never gets them in front of humans that they don't even know, that might be new. And see, it all comes down to how that time and energy is going to be invested. Now, just think about this for a moment. The time part's pretty clear. If somebody's asking for your time or demanding your time, we think, well, I was going to do this, or we say, you know what, I can't. I've already got something planned for then, and it's blocked in, and you've preserved that. But on the energy side, when you think about that, to accomplish anything, it takes all sorts of energy. It takes mental energy, it takes emotional energy, it takes physical energy, as well as some others. Now, here's the thing, a lot of times we don't realize that there are energy drains on the system. And most of those energy drains tend to be either people that have negative energy in our lives somewhere. I don't mean that in any weird new age way. What I mean is that when we feel powerless in a relationship, or we're dealing with somebody that's irresponsible or not taking responsibility for their lives, and it's taken all this effort that's really not going to go anywhere and not really helping, like we talked about in enabling, that's an energy drain because it's negative outflow that doesn't add to anything. Or when you have a conflictual relationship that doesn't get resolved, or all of these kinds of people dynamics that end up sucking the energy out of us, that's gas that went out of the tank that can't drive that car to where you want to go, as well as your brain won't work as well. And so we've got to think about, I'll give you a great example. There's one person that I have to interact with sort of here and there, unbelievably talented person. And usually it's in a phone conference. And when I do, if I had the choice between having that phone call and doing my own root canal, I would do my own root canal. It is the most draining conversation ever. But I know I'm doing it for a reason. It's a good reason, and there's great benefit. But you know what? There is no way I would schedule that call right before I tried to go on a stage and give a presentation or talk to you or write something that took any presence of mind. Because after interacting with this person, I'm like, it's just awful. So you've got to begin to also see, are you saving the best of your time for the best of what you want to do? You hear couples talk about that all the time. There's no time left where they have any, so they just go veg and they never talk because it all went somewhere else. So time and energy are basically what you have to invest in to get where you want to go. And in these functional areas, what I mean by functioning is, how is the clinical arena going? Do you feel good enough to be able to function, or do fears and anxieties and all that hold you back? Secondly, in the relationships, as we talked about. But thirdly, as we're going to see, with actual performance goals and using your talents to invest in dreams turning into actual realities. Because, a dream without reality that makes it land somewhere in the real world, that's just a fantasy. And time and energy are the way that occurs, and your boundaries have everything to do with that. Okay, so a little bit more about this energy thing and your boundaries. When we're talking about energy, we're talking basically about how fuel gets converted into motion, right? That's the way energy works. And so a human basically has sources of energy, and one of those is relationship. You know, we exist with our physical bodies. We got a mind and biochemistry and insulin levels and blood levels and dopamine and serotonin and all that stuff. It's physical in nature. We have a mental side or a spiritual side or an immaterial, non-physical aspect, and that's kind of our thinking patterns and the way we believe things and attitudes and the way we see the world and all of that. And the third leg of that stool is actually the connectedness that we have with other people. Now, I want to talk for a moment about that connectedness piece first and just get you to ask yourself if you did an audit of how much energy you have to dive into your goals and what you desire, and you look at the traffic pattern of your relationships, I want you to look for some dynamics. The first one is there may be some disconnectedness. In other words, that I was talking to a CEO the other day, and he was feeling a loss of energy and actually kind of looking to some things to provide energy that were not good things to provide energy. And we started to look at this, and he said, and I said, you're walking around life disconnected. He said, I got people around me all the time. I said, exactly. We started to audit where, what the kind of settings he was in. And it was always meetings that were taking from him, or conflicts he was having to resolve, or problems he was having to resolve. But when we looked at the inflow, how much time was he spending and carving out with good boundaries to make sure it's protected of people that actually fuel him? And I want you to do this because, you know, life is not all about receiving, it's about giving and outflow as well. But you can't have constant outflow unless you're also taking some time to pull into the gas station and there are relationships that fuel you. So I want you to get a piece of paper and look at it and say, these are relationships and these are experiences with those people that tend to fuel me, and I end up walking away with more energy to go pursue life, to go pursue my goals, to face my fears, to be less depressed, whatever area you're working in. These are my inputs, and those are very, very important to guard. Now, when you go to the physical side, what we know from all sorts of research in a lot of different fields is that people that guard their physical energy are the highest performers. One of the ways they do it is, like I said a moment ago, where you're making sure that things that are going to require the best from you, all your energy is not being drained by something that's less important or toxic or conflictual right before you got to go do that. That's kind of, you know, the one-on-one, 101. It is one-on-one too, right? So the big part here, though, is to remember that time and energy in the physical aspect is your physiology has got to be guarded to have the energy you want to be able to do life. For example, take depression. Depression is part emotional, it is part relational, it's part biochemical, and a lot of what we know about resolving a depression is that exercise, for example, and what you're eating, what you're putting into your body, how much you're moving, drastically changes the energy levels in those kinds of even emotional or emotionally draining maladies. Anxiety is another one. We have stress hormones that tend to eat away at us. And so I want you to think, how's my body feeling? Do I wake up and do I say, good morning, Lord, or good Lord, morning? I mean, it's like, is it positive where you're looking at life and ready to go engage it? Or is it like, oh no, another day? A lot of that's physical. A lot of that is physical. So I want you to just do your audit. You hear this all the time. You know, you've heard it before, but your boundaries are going to have to protect that. So here's the key what we know from research about physical. If you will have two boundaries, time and space, In other words, if you've committed to something physical to get better, like sleep or like exercise or like going to the gym or Pilates or yoga or stretching or whatever it is, if you will put that in your calendar as a boundary and guard that, and also if you'll put it in your calendar in terms of logging the intake every day of what you're taking into your body, your physical energy, we know, begins to change. Okay, and that drives a lot of your goals. And then the other part of that, the other leg of that stool, the physical and the relational. The other one I said was the immaterial, the mental, the software, our thinking patterns, the spiritual side of us. I want you to look at your thinking patterns and begin to put some boundaries on those. A simple one. If you spend time thinking about stuff you can't control, I want you to do a boundary where you make a column and say, here's all the stuff that's affecting me that I can't control. And I want you to list it. And I want you to say, I'm going to worry myself sick over that for 10 minutes. Set a timer, put a boundary over it, and say, I'm not going to worry about that till tomorrow. And on the other side, you spend your mental energy in positive ways and positive thoughts and positive thinking patterns and put limits on that negative stuff. Your energy will change. Okay, so time and energy a lot of times gets spent helping other people. Is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. In fact, here's what research shows. If you are a person that gives yourself to other people, to help other people, you will actually flourish more than people who don't. Giving and serving and helping others is a key indicator of our happiness and our health and all things that kind of wrap up in a good life. But here's the problem. Many people that are very oriented to helping others are helping others, as we said before, when it's not helping. I'm going to say that again. They're helping others, but their helping is not helping. So, one of the key things you've got to do with your boundaries in helping others is, first of all, decide who do you want to help. Okay? Let's give a money analogy for this. All right? I hope that whoever you are and whatever amount you have, if it's tiny or huge, I hope that you're giving away at least a little portion of it to others who don't have any or have less than you. Very, very important aspect of life. But here's what we know. The people that give successfully, they decide with their boundaries, they decide, I'm going to give to people who actually, first of all, need it and who actually are going to use it well, and it's actually going to help them to get better. Now, that's different than giving to somebody who's using that money to continue a problem to go on, right? You're just bailing them out. They're never learning a budget. Say, yeah, I'd love to give you some money, but the money is also going to be tied to you bring me back the certificate from the financial planner that you went down and sat down with. You bring me the budget that you guys came up with, and you give me the schedule of how you're going to stick to that, and then I'll continue to help. See, that's different than giving. Well, your time and your energy are exactly the same way. Your time and energy are pretty much kind of in a certain way, they're fixed entities. You have so much time, you have so much energy. So I want you to sit down and decide, what kind of people do I want to help? What group? It might be, missional in your case, like you're going to devote your time to helping the homeless, or you're going to devote your time to helping extended family members who are disabled or who are having a hard time, or friends, or it can be all across the board. But the key thing here is boundaries are about self-control, and you're going to decide, I'm going to help first of all when it actually helps, not when it helps the problem to continue. But I'm also going to choose kind of where I want my helping to go. Now, that's one aspect of this, is being purposeful in making sure that your helping is actually helping instead of helping a problem to stay the same? That's called enabling. And are you helping kind of where you want to help? All right. Remember, when you say no to something or to somebody that needs something, that is not selfishness if you're a person that's giving. You can't solve all of the needs in the world. Okay? If you're solving none of the needs in the world, that's selfishness. That's self-centeredness, right? We're not helping anywhere. But if you've decided I'm helping this person with their tuition and this person with their food and this person, get well, this person overcome loneliness and this, that, and the other, and then 86 more come up and say, I need your time and energy, that's where you have to decide, what, I've got kind of all I can do right now. Because what happens with some people's energy is they literally exceed their capacity. There's something called caregiver burnout, and it's one of the things that we know that happens from families. I was talking to a lady the other day who was married to someone with some dementia that had started, and it's very, very, very difficult. And she was telling me, I feel bad, but I'm just at the end of my. And I said, you know what? People that give care in situations like this work in shifts. You don't see a nurse, for example, who works 24/7. And what we've got to do is we got to bring the whole family and some other resources together so you make sure that, yes, you want to give, but there's some time that you got to block out that's for you as well. And that's not a selfish thing to do. It'd be like not feeding a soldier. At some time, they got to get off the battlefield and go eat or drink some water or get some input or something good. So you got to think about that in terms of kind of how you're giving. Now, here's another thing. There are a lot of times when we're helping others, when we've got some role confusion. A lot of times we're trying to do for somebody, as I said previously, that they really ought to be doing for themselves. You'd be a great example of this. My very first job, I worked in this office. I go to work, and they had a part-time administrator that she handled all the projects and making everything work and stuff. And she was older. I was in my 20s. She had just retired. And she had actually been Jack Warner's executive assistant of Warner Brothers, really high levels of, doing projects. She had moved to the beach, wanted to get out of the house halftime, looked for an easy job, came to us, and so we had hired her. All right. So I come on the job, I got all this stuff, and there's insurance, the claims, and all this, projects, and we meet, and I put all this together and hand it to her, and she says, "Okay, thanks. I'll talk to you later." And she goes out to do the work. Right. About 20 minutes later, there's a knock on my door, and this seasoned assistant walks in, and she says this. I'll never forget it. She goes, "You have a problem." I said, "I do?" She said, "Yeah, you do." I said, "What is it?" She said, "Well, you've hired somebody for 20 hours a week, and you've given me about 50 hours of work. Which 20 would you like done?" I learned something that day. My role was to decide the priorities and the direction and everything that was important and most important, and to decide on my limits of what actually we were at capacity to do. Her role was to do certain things. But see, I was trying to get her to do my work. I wasn't making the hard decisions. I wasn't doing the budgeting of time and energy and all that. And she was, kind of having to do stuff I should have been doing. You can't do your kids' homework. You can't do your coworker's job. But enablers will drift over and begin to do that. Your energy goes right out the window. Boundaries take an accounting, and an audit of where it's going, and you spend it purposefully and also intentionally. So, in terms of when you say yes and when you say no, I'm going to give you a little simple formula to think about that. I want you to think about two words. Why? Why am I doing this? What's the motive for saying yes when I say yes? And then I want you to think about what? What will be the outcome of this expenditure of time and energy? Let's talk about the why for a moment. We've talked about that you've got to have priorities. Life has got to be lived on purpose. Now, I don't mean you have to get anal and color coded about every minute of every day, but I like to sit down and think, there's certain areas in my life that I want to make sure I'm moving forward and they're getting better and they're in a growth path, health and relationships and some goals and my spiritual life and, just a handful of things. And once I do that, then what I do is I try to look at, okay, am I giving the time that's needed to each of those? And have I defined the activities in each of those that are going to need that time? For example, if you're trying to have a good marriage or a good relationship, you look at your calendar, have you blocked out the time that it's going to take in order to preserve the activities that build that? Okay, now we've talked about that because that's prioritizing. And so the first why is when I'm saying yes to something, does it match what I've said is important to me? Does it match what I've said is important to you? Because remember, if it doesn't, if everything gets equal priority and you're saying yes, then it's sort of like, if everything's important, nothing is important. And those are hard decisions, but I want you to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Okay. For example, I'll give you a great example. Sometimes when I'm on a project and on a consulting project, I'll spend 2 or 3 days in brain drains, highly conflictual situations. Sometimes, not all of them, but sometimes it gets really, really hard. And by the end of those 2 or 3 days, I'm like, my eyes are rolling around in my head. You know what really helps me? When I get on the airplane to fly back home, I want to watch something stupid and mindless. It's not going to engage any emotion. It might be suspenseful. It's going to pull me into it, but it's just going to let me escape. All right, that's a good thing for me. I'm doing that for a reason. There are other times, maybe I got to write a book. I'm looking at a chapter. I'm a little anxious about this. Thing's not really working like I want it to, and I find myself, what's on TV? Okay, now the why I'm watching it, why I'm spending time like that, it's an avoidance behavior. It's anxiety driven. It's fear driven. There's a lot of things like that. Why do you say yes to this person? Because you don't want to upset them, or because there's a good reason to spend your time and energy doing that particular activity with that particular person? Is it guilt? Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Or is it desire? And if it's desire, is it desire that's focused on what you said you desire? See, I can want to do a lot of different things, but my want tos have got to drive some bigger want to, because we've also got to have energy to go do things we don't want to do in the service of something we want to do. Like pick up the phone and make a difficult call to resolve a conflict. I don't want to do that, but it serves something that I do want, and that's that I want a better relationship with that person. So, what is the why? Is it toxic? Is it control from somebody else? Is it manipulation? Is it fear? And does it serve what I want to serve? Now, that's the why. Other thing I said is the what. After I say yes to this, and if I don't say no, what am I going to feel like? What's it going to do to my energy? And what's it going to end up with in terms of value of driving what I'm trying to drive forward? So if we look at our motive, sometimes it can be a good motive. Oh, I'm doing this because I care about this project or that project or these people or whatever. But when I look at actually spending that time and I play it forward and I say, but what will be the real value of this activity in reaching that goal? See, that's the difference. A lot of people go to work because they're trying to, drive the mission of the company or drive a project forward, this, that, and the other. But when you look at the activities and the meetings and the actual work they're doing, if they would say, did that meeting really help us get there? what's the actual outcome? And what's the actual outcome, not only of my time and energy in relation to what I think is important, but what's the actual outcome of my time and energy? Can I afford it? Is the energy, is the way I'm going to feel afterwards going to be injurious? In other words, it doesn't just drain energy like running an Olympic marathon, but is it actually that I end up, I spend time and energy on that, now I'm depressed. Now I like hate life. Now I'm very pessimistic about the nature of the world because this person is so toxic. So just think, why am I doing this? And what's going to be the outcome? Did it add value to time and energy and results? If you look at those two motives, when you're starting to, or motives and outcomes, I should say, when you're starting to spend the two things you have in life, your time and energy, then it's really going to drive you. I love to make a decision. I'm going to watch this show on the airplane because it's going to bring me out of my brain drain. Do you know that there's research also that says the average mood of a person watching a sitcom on television is mildly depressed. The average mood of someone who reads a good book, and an invigorating book, is mildly optimistic and elevated. Now, sometimes you can watch it to refuel you, but sometimes the way we're spending our time, social media does that. We know that from research. Too much of that, depressing. Other things will actually get you to an outcome you want. So, why am I doing it, and what's the outcome? Okay, so we talked about a lot of strategies when it comes to your time and energy, and a lot of ways to think about that. But I want to at least mention the word burnout and talk about that for a few minutes. There's a difference in burnout and being tired. And it's really important to diagnose that because, tired is a good thing. We expend our energy over time, we run out of energy, and we get tired. But tiredness has a certain kind of good quality to it because you were investing your time and energy in ways that fit in all the kind of ways we talked about earlier with the right priorities and right dynamics and this and the other. And you get tired, and then there's something that cures tired. You know what it is? Rest. Rest is like a big deal. Rest is a huge deal, and that's another boundary you got to be setting to make sure that you're getting the proper rest. In fact, we know this from the highest performers. They 100% engage for a period of time, and then they 100% disengage. So make sure you're having engagement along the lines we talked about, but also periods of disengagement, because if you don't disengage, then you are going to not be dealing with the tiredness very well. You're not going to be replenished. And then you do kind of start to get a little burnout of that kind of flavor because there's a part of you that's needing something that's not getting fulfilled. And that's going to start the cycle. Okay, so that's the first part of it. But then I want to say that there's a difference between tired and burnout. See, rest and replenishment will cure tired. Rest won't cure burnout. You know why? Because there's nothing to reignite. Because probably there was not much ignited to begin with, or things were continually blowing out the flame. So I want to talk a little bit about that. There's a qualitative aspect to burnout that's different than the quantitative aspect to being tired. See, we just work too much or work too hard or whatever. We get tired. That's a number. We get certain hours of rest or days or weeks or whatever. Come back to life. Burnout tends to be more qualitative. And the things that lead to burnout, there are dynamics in there that basically will kind of fuel that. One of the biggest ones is if you're engaged in some sort of activity that you don't feel connected to, that it doesn't connect to your heart, that the people connection in there is not where you need it. Like you can take, like special ops people, like Navy SEALs, they go into awful situations, but they're so connected with their team, and they're also connected and aligned with things that matter to them and their gifts and talents, that even under extreme conditions, they can get tired, probably don't get burned out until it goes to, way, 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 way too long. So look at the level of connection. Number two, control. one of the big factors in burnout is the degree to which you feel like you have control and choices. Now, I don't mean you control the universe, but if you're in a situation where everything that affects you is outside of your control and you've lost a sense of personal control, that you have any choices at all, choices in how you respond, choices in the tasks you do, choices in the way that you order your activities, choices basically in investment of time and energy, choice and control are a big deal. And we see people sometimes in situations, like even in businesses, where they're starting to get burned out, and the leadership or their management will analyze that and figure out how to give them more control over choices of schedule and time and energy and activities and connecting that to a purpose, and we can turn that burnout around. So look at the amount of control you have. The third thing is, what's the balance between good and bad? We all need, in order to not burn out, we need something better than us to aspire towards, but we can't have something better than us that we can never feel like we're good enough, and it's always kind of like bad in some way. And there's this negative, emotionality that we're really not able to ever process. So you got to look at that balance of, is the good, the goal, and all of that I'm striving towards, is that a motivating goal or is it a diminishing goal? And the nature of that relationship between the goal and the ideals and the reality of what I'm able to, are there any wins? Is there any way that I or somebody else or the result could say, good, we made progress today? Or we might not make progress today, but we're kind of getting somewhere, and we're doing something good here. So, too much of hopeless, no positive movement, feedback, victories, and it's just all bad. That's going to kind of get to us. Or we can be making progress, but the ideal is so harsh and unsatisfiable in the tone of it that'll burn us out as well. Another one is, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I want you to feel like an adult and not a child in terms of aligning with your talents. Now, you take a little kid, and usually there's a parent that's kind of saying, here, try this sport and that sport and this food and that food and this musical instrument and that one. And they kind of, design how they're going to spend their talents and skills and all of that. But as you get to be an adult, what happens is you gravitate toward, mom, dad, I don't really like piano. I like the violin, or I don't like baseball, I like football, or I don't like history, I like art. And you're starting to make choices to invest your time and energy in things that actually match your gifts and your talents. And you're in some sort of an adult way of deciding how to use those. So you're not being judged all the time, as I mentioned. You have control of it, but you're also in control of defining who you are. And if you're going down somebody else's path, like society or parents or family or friends or your culture, or somebody else says you ought to be this, and really your heart's somewhere else, that's not your talents, it's not your gifts, it's probably going to lead to a little burnout as well. So time for boundaries. So just look at those areas of alignment on the qualitative side of it, as I've said earlier, and all the other lessons about this, the people and the goals and the priorities and that. But you've got to also look at these dynamics of connection, control, balancing of the good and the bad, and also how much you feel like an adult and not a child in your scenario. If you're doing all of that, good chance you're going to turn burnout around. and thank you for joining me as we take a look at the kind of stuff you can live with and the kind of stuff you shouldn't live with when we're talking about investing your heart and mind and soul and talents and business and a bunch of other stuff with people. There are realities that successful people do in relationships and work better than people that don't have a lot of success. And let me tell you what one of those are. One of those is they tend to keep the main thing the main thing. They tend to emphasize what's important versus treating everything the same way. Now, I'm going to say that again. Successful people tend to really weigh in and care about the things that are important much more than the things that are not important. Now, nothing or no arena is this more important in than dealing with people, because sometimes what we'll do in dealing with people is we'll kind of be perfectionistic. And if somebody's got any issues at all, or they're not the kind of this or that we like, our own preferences, sometimes or they make mistakes or whatever, sometimes we'll write them off. But the reality is that no person is perfect, no person is without issues. But, you ready for this? There really are misdemeanors and felonies. I'm going to say that again. There's misdemeanors and there's felonies, and there's some mistakes that people make and some things that they have about them that we can live with because you can work with them. But there's other stuff that really, are kind of permission to play values and permission to play kinds of behavior. And we don't want to continue. I don't mean you have to blow somebody off or end a relationship, but you have to have pretty firm limits around some of this stuff and say, I can't be around this kind of thing, until it changes. So I want to give you a little bit of a diagnostic here in thinking about, as you're wanting to get close to people. Now, let me start with a disclaimer. I'm not talking about everybody in your life has got to be a jewel or a treasure, right? We all need some wacko friends. We all need some crazies in our life. Think how boring it would be if you didn't have that. And, all of us have that, right? But what I'm talking about here is I was talking the other day to a really high performer who was telling me that there are some people over the years that gotten in his inner circle that, just weren't all that they should be in terms of some trustworthiness and other stuff. And I said, it's probably pretty good when you're talking about the inner circle. I'm not talking about all your friends in the world, but I'm talking about the inner circle where you make an investment of some treasure. And it could be your heart, could be your mind, could be your soul, it could be your money, whatever it is. But to the extent that you're going to make a real investment, the deeper of an investment you go in people, I want you to think about the three C's. Think about the three C's. And he said, what are the three C's? I said, well, it's a formula that's been around for a long time, but it really is a good one. And here are the three C's: competency, character, and chemistry. Competency, character, and chemistry. And if you're talking about going to a deep level with somebody, then you want to make sure all three of those things are there. Now let's look at each one of them for a second. Competency. To make an investment in someone, what we want to see in them are the skills required for what I'm going to be investing in them, right? If somebody's going to be in your inner circle of, like a growth buddy, right? Somebody that you're going to confide in and you're going to, be sort of in the growth path together and be peers and all that. There's some basic competencies that you would want in a person like that. Can they listen? Or can they be motivating? Can they be non-critical? But can they tell you the truth and can they confront you? If you're going to date somebody, there's some competencies that you want there, right? You want some communication skills and you want them to be able to resolve conflict. You want them to be able to express vulnerability and express care and a bunch of other stuff. If you're going to hire somebody, there's certain competencies that have to be there to make sure that what you invest or entrust to them is going to be delivered. So the first one is, do they have the basic competencies to be a friend, or to be a date, or to be a spouse, or to be, an employee, or to be a partner, or to be an attorney, or whatever it is, do they bring to the table the abilities to fulfill what I'm going to entrust? Okay, the second C is character. And the thing about character is a lot of times we'll think about it, just in terms of morals and ethics, like do they lie, cheat, or steal? Well, that's really important. But how about some other things as well? I have rarely seen, like when I used to do a lot of marriage counseling, I've rarely seen a couple come in and say, we don't know if we're going to make it. And I say, why? And have one of them say, because he or she lies, cheats, or steals. Is that all we're looking for in character? No, we're looking for some other things. Here's the kind of stuff we hear. I can't stand it because they're so controlling. I feel smothered and like I don't exist and have no choices. Or they don't ever listen and all they do is, yell at me or preach at me or talk about themselves or whatever, and I don't feel like I can connect. Or they're so critical that I feel like I'm doing everything wrong all the time. Or they're so irresponsible I can't depend on them. Or, they overspend so much that they're not responsible with resources and they kind of squander and waste everything. Or I can't connect with them because, there's no authenticity or being real or vulnerability. Or they're so perfectionistic, it's like nothing ever pleases them, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time. Or they're angry all the time, or they lie, or whatever it is. See, what we're talking about in the character part is somebody can be very, very competent, but they can have issues about their makeup that can make a significant relationship, personal or business relationship, really kind of at least extremely limited or unable to be done. So you want to look at character. What are they glued together like in all those dimensions? Their ability to be relational, their ability to be responsible, to allow you to be a free person with your own choices, to resolve conflicts and forgive and face issues like that and have perseverance and courage. We're not talking about perfect people. We're talking about normal stuff here, okay? But character is important. And then the last one is chemistry. You know, what does chemistry mean? Well, you see it in all areas of life. You ever seen a basketball team where that team had chemistry together? They just connected. They enjoyed each other. They were for each other. They laughed at each other. They cried together. You just know it when you feel it, right? It can be in a friendship. It can be in a business relationship. It can be in an organization. It can be in a dating relationship leading to marriage. But basically, what is chemistry? It means that when you're together, there's just something good that happens and you like being there and time goes by fast and you add to each other rather than, gosh, I got this really competent person of good character and I keep looking at my watch because I can't wait for this hour to be over. That's not what you want. You want people in the inner circle that you have that kind of likeness with. All right. So, what can you live with? Well, you can live with a lot. Imperfections are good. But when you're talking about the stuff you can't live with, we're talking about the big stuff, like somebody that does really vile, hurtful stuff. Faithlessness, if you can't depend on somebody to be faithful and loyal to you. If they're perverse in some way and twisted and take good things and twist them in some way to manipulate you. If they're evil, meaning that they actually enjoy it sometimes when they inflict pain upon you and they do hurtful things on purpose, when they slander or talk about you behind your back, if they're prideful or haughty or narcissistic and looking down their nose at you, that's hard to go with for a long time, right? Or if they're lying or deceitful, those are permission to play things that are not okay. Or just general wickedness. There are some people are just not okay. So think about this. What can you know, give it up in terms of preferences. Sometimes somebody's not everything that we would be or we like, or it's not a perfect match. But there are some things that you got to ask yourself: are these deal breakers? When it comes to lying and betrayal, unfaithfulness, that kind of stuff. That's where we have to draw the line sometimes. Say we can't go forward until this is resolved. This other stuff we can work with. So make a difference. There are misdemeanors and felonies. and do your diagnosis in those three areas before you let somebody into your inner circle and invest more of your treasure, of your heart, mind, soul, your strength, your resources, and whatever else you have. Do a good evaluation to know if you want to do that. I'm Dr. Henry Cloud. It's good to be with you. Send us your feedback, and I'll see you next time.